For this session, it is unfortunate to inform that Brother Seyed Jamaluddin Behram Miri is not able to join us today as he is still recovering from COVID. As we pray for his full and speedy recovery, we would like to welcome and convey our much appreciation to Sister Fatima Ahmad, co-author of the paper, who will be presenting it today. And Sister Fatima Ahmad is based in Toronto, Canada, which is currently 3 a.m. in the morning. Besides herself, we will also have Venerable Abbot Ken Rinpoche Geshe Teshi Sering, and will be moderated by Dato' Goh Pipin. Dr. Goh Pipin is the president of Losang Drakpa Buddhist Society, a Tibetan Mahayana Buddhist center located in Petaling Jaya. She is also one of the founding members for Kasih Hospice Foundation, an NGO that provides free end-of-life care to patients with end-stage cancer and renal disease, and currently hold the position of the foundation as the chairperson. She was trained as an eye specialist and was serving the Ministry of Health for 33 years until her retirement in 2022. Without further ado, I hand over to Dr. Goh Pipin to begin our third and final session for today.
Thank you, Brother Adli. And welcome back to the last session, Vulnerability and Sustainability of Planet Earth. Let me now introduce our two learned speakers. The first speaker is Ms. Fatima Ahmad. She's a co-founder of ISIP, which is the International Students of Islamic Psychology, an organization that promotes people's interest in Islamic psychology. It is also one of the co-organizers of this conference. Fatima graduated with Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Bachelor of Education from York University in Toronto, Canada. She is currently doing a master's degree in pastoral studies from the University of Toronto and will soon be a certified spiritual integrated psychotherapist. Fatima has studied the traditional Islamic sciences in Toronto and Jordan. She has been an educator in the public school system in Toronto for the last 15 years. She also holds a license to teach Tajweed, which is a proper Quran recitation. Our second speaker is Venerable Abbot Ken Rinpoche Geshe Teshi Sering. Venerable Geshe Teshi is currently serving as the 91st Abbot of Serame Monastery in South India. Prior to this, he was the resident teacher at Jamyang Buddhist Center in London for 24 years, and he has been teaching and guiding students in Buddhism in many European countries, in the United States, as well as Asia, through many Buddhist studies, discourses, conferences, and interfaith dialogues, either in person or online. Geshe Teshi graduated with the Larampa Geshe degree, the highest educational qualification within the Buddhist tradition, from Serame Monastic University in 1990. He is also has a Master in Art degree in Social Anthropology from University of London in 2017. Geshe Teshi teaches Buddhism to both modern educated people and monks at the monasteries. He's a gifted teacher with his rich Buddhist knowledge and his ability to convey complex Buddhist psychology into very clear teaching, as well as through his kindness and delighted sense of humor. Realizing the need to make Buddhism accessible to many, he develops a 2-year online Foundation of Buddhist Thought courses and has published 6 books of the Foundation of Buddhist Thought series. They are relevant to both beginners exploring Buddhism as well as experienced Dharma practitioners on the spiritual path. With his vast contribution to the community, he was awarded the British Empire Medal in the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2019. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Fatima Ahmad to present her view in vulnerability and sustainability of planet Earth. The floor is yours, Fatima.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goh. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you to everyone and to all of the organizers, and definitely on behalf of Seyed Jamaluddin, who extends his apologies and deep sadness for not being able to make it today. On his behalf and on ISIP, we're very happy to be here. and very honored and very humbled to be amongst people like Jesse Tashi and yourself. And thank you for those warm introductions. So I'll start with sharing my slides. Okay. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the practical, I'll be trying to focus on practical ways of encouraging sustainability from an Islamic psychology lens. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We begin in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, Lord and sustainer of everything that is in the heavens and the earth. We have such scholars and such esteemed scholars who have been illuminating for us from the primary sources of the Quran and the prophetic example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The encouragement and the impetus to live in ways that are sustainable. But I think we've also been hearing of ways that we need to bridge that gap between theory and between practicality. And so what I'm going to try to offer in this short time that we have together are what we need to do in order to start to bridge that gap is to have an awareness and an introspection of the soul and its influences. So in the Islamic realm and the Islamic conception of the human beings is that we are created with a soul and we are created with external influences such as the devil, or what we call Satan, but we also have internal influences such as what we call the nafs. So I'll be expounding a little bit more upon that and why the awareness of such a construction of the human being can impact the environment, and also positively and also negatively. And I think what we've all been hearing over the course of this day is also the need to live spiritually. And when we do that from our traditions and live in a spiritual manner, we're challenging the material world and its inclinations. And then what we need to do to bring that to in a living reality and a practicality is enlisting and encouraging community support at our religious venues, and hopefully to then create a cultural shift. So the question that is overarching is, how does an understanding of the concept of the soul through an Islamic lens impact the environment? So as I was mentioning, the soul has different influences. And we also have the concept of the fitra and the nature of man and the nature of the human being being created to be able to connect with the divine and to connect with God, and to recognize that we have inclinations that will try and distract us from that. So the things that will distract us from that is what we call, of course, we have the whisperings of the devil, but we also have something within us, which is called the nafs, or the lower self. And how can that, we don't sometimes always think about how does my nafs, or indulging in my nafs, impact the environment. So, for example, in the Quranic, in the Quran itself, we have a conception of the nafs, many different levels that are expounded upon, and some of the key aspects of the way that the nafs has been explained to us in the Quran is that there's the nafs al-ammara bis-su. That means that there's a nafs that incites to evil or to lower and base kinds of desires. And we're asked in the Quran to try and counter that and to try and refrain from that. At the same time, this nafs is also seen as something that can be changed and can be transformed. So you're not stuck in one level to remain in the nafs. If we've ever seen children, and I'm an educator, as you mentioned, so if you ever see children or young children, you can see where the nafs is just, unbridled and unchecked. And but we have the ability to cultivate it, and the nafs can go through different stages, as mentioned in the Quran. The nafs can be the nafs al-lawama, where the nafs is self-reproaching and much more aware of its tendencies. And you can also reach a stage of nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the tranquil nafs, or the nafs that is at peace. So there's not being stuck in a level. The nafs is transformable. Now, why is that important to our environment? So how does this lack of spirituality that we're living in a secular worldview negatively impact our environment? And so, I live in North America, and viewing people as machines, or in terms of just their utilitarianism or their productivity, or as marketable, these are all against the spiritual dimensions and the ability to value people in terms of their character, in terms of their humanity. Again, being an educator in a secular system, we are educating students to be a good citizen who contributes to society. And though this may be a partially of a good goal, it's not accounting on how to raise a God-conscious human being, or the values that are inherently implicit when we're only looking at productivity and how to contribute. Is idioms that we see, such as time is money, or people are seen as cash cows. So to kind of center the Islamic concept of the soul, I just chose two, although there's so many, and our esteemed scholars have done a beautiful job, and I'm sure will continue to do a beautiful job in elucidating parts of the Quran and the prophetic message. But I just focused on one, and this Quranic ayah, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. And so here in Surah, or chapter 79, verses 40 to 41, the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And for the one who fears the standing before his Lord and restrains his soul." So here again is the word nafs, restraining of the soul from passion. The garden will be his refuge and abode. And similarly, in the hadith, or the prophetic saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he says, "The things that I fear for my community are the following of passion and limitless expectation of worldly gain. Following desires turns one away from God, and limitless expectations makes one forget the afterlife." So these are kind of the centering aspects of the need to restrain and refrain our nafs and our tendencies to want to indulge in this world. So continuing to build on that, the Islamic concept or spirituality of working on ourselves, we have what we call spiritual diseases. And these spiritual diseases, and these are just some of them, kinds of concepts common within, mentioned in the Quran, also mentioned in the Hadith, can negatively impact the environment. So we have the concept of takabbur, or arrogance and pride. We have human beings mentioned in the Quran being created in a state of haste, or always being in a state of haste, and the need to try and do things quickly and without thinking. And this is contrary to, and again, we see in North America that just the pace of life being so quick. There's tendencies in the lower nafs, or in the lower base desires, to go to extremes in food consumption, but really to go to extremes in almost any aspect of our lives, but definitely in food consumption. There's the concept of riya, in ostentation. And if we look at takabur, or arrogance and ostentation, and how that can impact the environment, we see the need to, try and compete with others, to try and in material goods, in ways that we can outdo other people, creating, and as communities, when we're trying to create buildings or places or things that are, bigger and better and bigger and better. And so this just becomes, these are manifestations of diseases of the heart. Ujub, or conceit. Again, if we look at the billion-dollar industry of makeup and of all sorts of, beauty products, feeding into these types of diseases as well. And tul al-amal. So in Imam al-Ghazali's Minhaj al-Abidin book, the excessive expectation, and this is when the concept of not having an afterlife, or our life, again, something that is commonly said here is, oh, well, you only live once. But if our concept in the Islamic concept is that we're here for a short amount of time, but our soul does continue. So this is not the seat and the place of all of our expectations. But if we don't have that concept, then it's easy to put all of our expectations in this world, and to go to extremes, and to accumulate and to feed that greed. So the antidote and the Islamic concepts which counter that are tazkiyah, which is the purification of the diseases of the soul. And this is, again, the heart of spirituality in Islam. To how can, when we're working on ourselves to purify our hearts, to purify our souls, how is that even that can actually even positively impact the environment? So we have the concept of zuhud, and refraining from our desires, which was mentioned and highlighted in the Quranic ayah that I shared. We have the central aspect of becoming God conscious, or becoming God aware, which is taqwa, which is largely what the Quran is calling its listeners to. And we have the concept of wasat, or being the middle ground. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was always encouraging people to take the middle ground, to fast and then to not fast, to get up at night and to sleep at night. And so not to go to extremes even in our worship, but in everything that we do, to try and find a middle ground. And then as I was mentioning, the concept of knowing that you will be standing before your Lord with a sense of responsibility. And khulafa is the word that's used as vicegerent of being in this world. And so there's a sense of accountability that we have in being created in our actions, and being accountable. And again, if there's no sense of accountability, then it's easy to indulge. And of course, the exhortation for tawadu, or humility, and rida, and the sense of contentment. And the contentment, is a spiritual state that, when inculcated, is independent of of what material needs, or whether you have it or you don't have it. you are contented with what Allah, with what the Lord has decreed. And if your status changes at any point, you know, with natural disasters or forced migrations or any type of things that we have no control over, there's still that ability to hold wealth in your heart and not in your necessarily in your hand. So how does being a more God-conscious, having taqwa, spiritual person help the environment in practical ways? So as I was trying to highlight that, you know, all of our traditions, you know, encourage us to have more gratitude. And this naturally will create a person with less greed and less consumption. Also, when we're focused on seeing the humanity and the soul and, you know, treating people in ways that are befitting, we're more invested in human relationships, and there's less exploitations of humans for personal advancement. If we look at fast fashion, you know, a lot of the global south is involved in, you know, manufacturing, you know, cheaply made and easily accessible clothing for the global north. And this is largely done in horrendous conditions in sweatshops. So, you know, being invested in human relationships and being more God conscious and knowing that we'll be accountable for the way that we treat people as well has a huge impact on the environment. And also, of course, you know, being a more God-conscious person and spiritual and bringing spirituality to the forefront allows for that contemplation, allows for the slowing down of our world and focusing on being present and not just efficient. So, bringing this now to a practical level. I wanted to just highlight, you know, some of the common Muslim gatherings. So we have the Friday prayers, the Ramadans, the Eids, the Mawlid celebration, which is the celebration of the birth of the Prophet, funerals, births, and marriages. You know, a lot of these are, you know, funerals, births, and marriages, of course, are common in every religion, but all of these gatherings are potential avenues to influence cultural changes and enlist community support for more ecological practices. And so something that I like is this pyramid of needs. So we have Maslow's pyramid of needs. So this is a spin-off of that by Sarah Lazarovic. Where it's called the hierarchy of needs. And you can see at the bottom, it says use what you have and then borrow and swap, thrift, make, and buy. And so in order to implement a reduced carbon footprint as religious communities and communities of faith, we can think about as a community how we can start to model and support a hierarchy of needs. So, you know, have we made it okay in our communities for our members to borrow? You know, when we're having gatherings, is it okay for us to say to someone, you know, could you bring, you know, 5 extra plates to the gathering because I'm having a large gathering and I don't want to use disposables? Have we made that okay? You know, have we made a culture that says that's okay to do? Have we made it okay to swap? I was actually really impressed with one of my colleagues when I was taking an environmental education class, and she was from the Christian faith, and she told me that she hadn't bought clothes in about 7 years. And I said, really? And she said, yes, and that's because of her church, because the church was holding gatherings where they would swap clothing. And so I was actually very inspired by that. And the next time that I held a gathering, a large gathering actually in my home, we did a hijab swap. And so you still get that sense of getting something new, but at the same time, it's very ecologically friendly. And so, are we creating spaces and modeling ways that we can foster this type of thinking? And are we making it okay for people to purchase secondhand or from thrift stores? Does all of the furniture need to be new? Does all of the clothing that we need to have, does it always need to be new? So in those religious gatherings and functions and celebrations that we're having, we need to start thinking about all of these matters. In marriages, marriages tend to be, very elaborate. But can we have large gatherings, but keep them much more simpler? Do we, instead of, 10-course meals, could we have, much simpler meals? There tends to be an overspending and an over exaggeration and riyah and the concepts that I mentioned about, showing off and opportunities for people to outdo each other in these functions. So these are the spaces that we as communities can start to set and shift different norms. If we think about mosque parking lots, now again, I'm speaking from a North American perspective, so I don't know if these are the same issues in different parts of the world or that Muslims experience in Malaysia. But in definitely here, we have issues with mosque parking lots. Are we facilitating ways for people to carpool? Do we have bike racks? Do we have opportunities that we're signaling through our religious communities in our spaces that these things are important? When we think about Ramadan, Ramadan is a time for refraining, and unfortunately, sometimes it becomes a time for excess, which is absolutely opposite to what the Quran calls us to, which is taqwa. Can we have meat-free iftars, for example? So some of these, like practical aspects that I was, just trying to highlight. Can we have green iftars? Can we have iftars where we say no to water bottles and where we're composting, where we make alliances with food banks and shelters, and we can take extra food from our gatherings to our local communities? We have a beautiful initiative here in Canada, which is the Give 30, where people of all faiths are working together during the month of Ramadan to end poverty and hunger. Can we create challenges for device usage or off the time grids that would allow for more contemplation? Can we have, rooftop gardens? Now, again, this is dependent on climate and particular cultures, but, can we, again, like have different ways of traveling to our religious gatherings that, help build ecologically and sustainable? Can we lobby for more bus stops near mosques, for example? And wudu consumption, I was impressed with one of our earlier speakers, Esteta Liana, who in Singapore, who was mentioning in the Harmony Center, opportunities for people to learn how to reduce water usage in the ablution that is performed before prayers. So, we need this cultural shift, and this historically, the cultivation of gardens and architectural incorporation of fountains and being connected to nature have been key contributions of Muslims to the world. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, is celebrated by humans, but he was also celebrated by the natural world, where we have reports of camels and trees and rocks speaking and crying and greeting him. And he had an intimate relationship with animals and the natural world. So, I wanted to leave on a kind of hopeful note and example. And so, can we use our existing religious spaces in a more creative, supportive, and ecologically friendly ways? And one of the beautiful examples, I'm really hoping it's to visit in Cambridge soon, which is the Cambridge Central Mosque, which has done a beautiful job in committing to sustainability. So this is taken from there. This is a picture of it, and the mosque is committed to sustainability. It's advanced eco design, gives it a near zero carbon footprint. It honors the natural forms with sustainable timber vaulting and reminds the visitor of our connection to nature. Some of the features, as I mentioned, it has timber, it has roof lights supplemented by low energy LED bulbs, while photovoltaic cells on the roof help generate renewable energy from sunlight. It's well insulated. It has highly efficient heat pumps. It has parking underground. Rainwater is harvested. There's bike racks available. And there's a community garden open to the public all the time. Okay, so this is an ayah or a verse from the Quran which says, وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ, and whatever good of the blessings that you have, it is from God. So I really thank you for all of your time, and for if there's been any good from this, it's from our Creator, and if there's been any mistakes, it's been mine. And I invite anyone who is interested in connecting with us at ISIP, as International Students of Islamic Psychology. They're more than welcome to connect with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. We have learned so much of your sharing, especially on the cultural shift and the potential that we can transform from our lower self to a positive cultural friendly as well as environmental friendly self. Thanks for so many tips, and I'm sure I see in the chat box that people are so happy that your sharing are just appropriate to this sustainability topic. Now I would like to invite Geshe Tashi Sering for his view about the topic, this vulnerability and sustainability of planet Earth from the Buddhist perspective.
Hi. Greeting to all the great speakers and also organizers and also people who participate in this very important, and one of the earlier speakers has said, very historical gathering, virtual gathering. And I feel very honored and also very humble be here and to say a few words from the Buddhist point of view on the ecology, particularly vulnerability and sustainability. Now here, I don't have, I'm a lazy man. I don't have any beautiful presentations on the site, slides to show, and that's my apologies. So I will follow the old tradition, everything only through verbal, not very much visual. And so all the previous speakers from the Islamic point of view and from the Buddhist point of view, and particularly just Fatima, her presentation from the Islamic point of view, in general essay, what is said in the Quran, and then practically what we can do to really to preserve our ecology and environment for the coming generations. It was really beautifully presented. There is a part of what is said in the Quran, and there is also part of what we can do practically at the marriage ceremony, at the gathering villages. And really, when she presented, particularly in the practical part, very much moved. Thank you for Fatima, for your presentation. So I will present, the first part, these two topics of vulnerability of our ecology and the sustainability of our ecology from Buddhist theoretical point of view. Buddha, the historical Buddha, had, taught many times to his followers. In Sanskrit, the term is used, patita samupata, and quite often translated in English, dependent origination or dependent arising. One of the earlier Buddhist professor used slightly different terms, co-origination or something like that. And that is something which Buddha taught to his followers to understand all things and events, external or internal, big or small, the universe, our planet, our continent, our home, or in terms of the living beings living in there, starting from I, my family, my community, my countrymen, fellow men and women, then 7.5 billion human beings. Then also include all living creatures. They are coming into being, coming into existence. They come into being, come into existence, and they are continue to exist, dependent on each other's. My joys, happiness, fulfillment, same as my sorrow, sadness, difficulties. These are coming into being that I experience due to many, many different factors. And it is the same to all other living beings. And these different factors, some are big, some are small. For example, I think maybe 2 decades ago, there was an article written by one of the scientists, I think environment or ecology scientists, talking about, butterflies' wing flapping somewhere in the Brazil, Amazon forest have an impact on the other side of the continent. Though butterfly, flapping its wing is very, very small action, but it has an impact. So Buddha and the subsequent Buddhist teachers have taught to their followers, individuals, collections, actions, physical actions, verbal actions, mental actions have impacts. to oneself, to the community, to the wider community, internal and external, in this case, environment. In that sense, ecology is vulnerable because sentient beings, including human beings who live on this planet, they are 24 hours in actions. And many of those actions, are not very helpful to our ecology, our environment. And that's already listed some of the previous speakers. But that doesn't mean we human beings always do the destructive things. No. We human beings also have ability to work, to act constructively to one's own well-beings of one's own families, well-beings of one's own communities, and wider communities. We human beings have that kind of capabilities. So, ecology is vulnerable if human beings act destructively. When I say act destructively, as earlier Fatima used from the Islam's point of view, the term nuts, N-A-F-T. From the Buddhist point of view, that is affliction, delusion. As Fatima gone through, when she started to list what are the, some of those lists, talking about, limitless expectation, arrogant, consumption, conceit. She listed those. And these are exactly listed in the teachings of the Buddha. When Buddha explained the sorrow, the dukkha, the suffering of the living beings, these sufferings, the sorrows are not causeless. They come from the causes and conditions. And the causes and conditions are not always external. In fact, main causes are within ourselves. Within ourselves. And there are a long list of unhealthy mental states, which earlier I used the Buddhist terms, afflictions or delusions, but in a common, we can use unhealthy thoughts and emotions, such as Fatima listed under the nuts. When we act individually and collectively with greed, with anger, with ignorance, with a lack of contentment, those actions are destructive actions. Those actions will bring to oneself, to one's own family, to one's own community, to one's own society, and the wider world, pain, suffering, and in particular today's topic, ecological environment destruction. Because ecology, environment, by its nature, you know, what you call the, you know, transcend, by its nature, changeable. In Buddhist term, it's called impermanent. Impermanent, not permanent, impermanent. Because ecology, environment, which all these come together, you know, all the heats and, you know, waters, all this come together, that is what we talk about, ecology or environment, and it is impermanent. It is subject to change. And if we created excessive destructive causes, ecology to change, environment to change, to disaster, nobody can stop. Nobody can stop. Because it is nature. Law, nature of law is when the causes and conditions are created, they are completed, the result is definite. Not politicians or environmentalists, environments or whatever power they have cannot stop when the causes and conditions are created. So therefore, you know, understanding, awareness of vulnerability of our ecology, and that on that base, if we human beings, if we contribute our ecology to destroy, then, you know, nobody can stop that. So we need to raise the awareness. On the same token, although ecology, environment is vulnerable, we can create constructive causes and conditions. Like, for example, recently, sometime in November, somewhere in Scotland, have this, you know, the big summit, how to stop global warming. Though it is talking about in a global level, something 80-something country representative had participated, but the main action is, as Fatima had pointed out, it is at the individual level, at the community, at the marriage ceremony, as I found very, very nice, you know, idea, borrowing things, shopping things. Those are the really, really practical things. To do that, then again, it is very much our mental state, as the other side of the, you know, the nuts, what the Fatima used in Buddhist, we will use the term, you know, the wisdom. That earlier I pointed out, and you know, the theory of dependent origination. Understanding of that all things and events are dependently originated, dependently arising nature. Nothing is static or on and off itself. That kind of wisdom is extremely helpful. But that wisdom should be, you know, supported by heart. What in Buddhist term is used, you know, the skillful means. Skillful means. So here I'm going to talk about sustainability. Skillful means, you know, the understanding other living beings, not just human beings, all living creatures. All living creatures are sort of to something that we should pay attention, at least not to cause harm, pain. Intentionally, not to cause pain or harm. Earlier, the term is used, restrain, refrain. Those are very, very useful mental strength. The term antidote that Fatima also used in Buddhism also talk a lot. If the greed, anger, ignorance are the root of our problem, then what is the solution? So solution is raising awareness, cultivating understanding, other living beings' well-being. Some of the earlier speakers talk about egoistic or self-centered attitude. And here, Padma listed arrogant, pride, conceit. Those are also in the Buddhist term. So to really deal with those unhealthy mental states, solution is inside. Solution is within ourselves. Antidote is within ourselves, not something outside. So really understanding other beings' well-being are as important as one's own well-being. Other communities' well-being are as important as one's own community's well-being. Have the ability to understand others' suffering. One of the earlier speakers talked about have the ability to express compassion, love. Those are the antidotes. Those are the antidotes. For example, greed, very greedy, the greed, the strong attached to the things and events, not satisfied having, the few pieces of clothes, constantly buying things, It is because of lack of contentment. There's no inner, there's no contentment, the things that we have got. The historical Buddha, Gautama, after his enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, his first ceremony, first teaching was given in a place called near Varanasi, Sarnath, to his 5 followers. Before he gave the main subject of the topic, he said to his 5 followers what kind of lifestyle they should have. And he said, middle way lifestyle. What is the middle way lifestyle? Not to indulge sensory pleasure and not to neglect basic necessities, to live in that life. The teaching was given more than 2,500 years ago. It is still extremely relevant, that kind of lifestyle. We talk a lot about 21st century. Earlier, the term is used, consumerism. It is true. Currently, I'm living in India, in the monastery. but I lived in London for nearly 25 years. I've experienced that. I've seen that. Bombarding the advertisement. Sometimes I feel these people are very, very strong. Though, wherever you look when you're driving, there are these huge billboards. Nowadays, less, because social media is taking place in their advertisement. But still, people try. And here, what is important for, particularly people who have religious, spiritual life to follow, we should to show the example. How to live ourselves in the middle way line, not extreme to become just consumerism, not to neglect basic needs, food, shelter, medicine, friendship, houses. If we do that, then ecology can be sustainable. Again, it is very much up to us, and particularly human beings. Though on this planet there are billions of species, humans, we talk a lot, human population is increasing, but only 7.5 billions. They talk about maybe, end of this century may have, another a few billions more. But compared to other species, number is not that high. But things that we consume, that is, if we continue like that, then it is not sustainable environmentally, ecologically. This beautiful blue planet that we live now is also impermanent, not permanent. Because it is impermanent, that means subject to change. It is in both sides, positive or negative, destructive or constructive. And to that, on living on this planet among the billions of different species, we humans have the big role to play. And currently, our role, we are not playing well. We are working more towards destructive, not constructive, ecologically. Now, how can we, these beautiful teachings from Islam, from Buddhist, and others, how can we take those messages, which I earlier put the question, how can we take this message to the non-believers? To say, Islam, genuine Islam practitioner, really follow Quran, and Buddhist practitioners, real practitioner, to follow teachings of the Buddha. Therefore, say, this is say we are not destroying the environment. But there are, 3-4 billions who not believer. How can we take these beautiful message, profound teachings to the non-believers? And that is really something important we need to think in this kind of conference. We need to talk, share. And to that, our contribution, Buddhist contribution, Islam's contribution to the world. And that is what, big question. His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, worked very, very hard to take some of these amazing, teachings, understanding of dependent origination, cultivation of love, compassion to the entire humanity, entire living creatures. Beautiful teachings, theories, practices in the some of those great Buddhist teachers, how can take those teachings to the university level, education, to the college level education, to the secondary level education, to the kindergarten level education. These are our hopes. If we are able to give the right education to the children who are in the kindergarten, in the secondary level, in the college, they will do the good things. And, which something we need to think about. Religious leaders, scholars, talk a lot, but how can we take those beautiful messages and then really, very genuinely, sincerely, not in a form of converting or anything like that, but these treasures that we have is not just use only ourselves, but also need to share to the others. And how to share to the others is something very important steps we need to think. And this kind of, gathering I found very, very helpful. I just mentioned several times when I listened Fatima's presentation. The terms are used slightly different. Maybe one of the fundamental philosophy might be different because Buddhism does not believe in an eternal creator. Everything is dependently arising. And, is Abrahamic religious tradition believe that eternal creator. Otherwise, many of these messages are very, very similar. And that means we have the common ground to take these good, very profound message to the, to the others, and which is important. So I will leave it my presentation here, and look forward if there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venerable Geshe Tashi, for this insightful presentation, especially compare both first speaker Fatima's presentation and what from the Buddhist perspective. And we are very happy to see there's so much of similarity. And I'm sure your heart, your eyes, and your ear are already open with this new concept of middle way living. And with that, we will now have a question answer for the next 45 minutes. You may use the chat Zoom function to raise hand, the raise hand function to ask question. Then you can unmute yourself. So please use this wonderful opportunity of 45 minutes, our last session, to ask your questions. Yes, Venerable Tenzin down. Tenzin Dadun, unmute please. Tenzin Dadun. Yeah. Venerable is based in Malaysia, but originally from Bhutan.
And very good afternoon to the Sister Fatima and the other speakers as well. So I have two questions here. The first one is for Geshe-la, and then the second one is for both the speakers, Geshe-la as well as Sister Fatima. So my question is, development has always been anthropocentric. To what extent should we consider other sentient beings in development from the Buddhist perspective? And my second question is for both speaker, which is Geshe-la and Sister Fatima. The question number 2 is, how do we balance economic progress and not with environmental sustainability? Thank you very much.
Okay, so first I will go because I have a particular question. So from the Buddhist point of view, every living creatures have the right to experience happiness and joys. Every living being have the right not to go through any form of pain and suffering. At that level, humans don't have higher right. That is Buddhist understanding. Nevertheless, we talk about creatures who have a bigger brain, have a bigger experience, more experience than the creatures have less brain. So there are these things, but in principle, humans don't have higher or bigger right to enjoy the environment than the other sentient beings. If we look at it in that kind of hierarchical system, then it is very, very difficult to talk about practicing love and compassion economically, equanimity, because all living beings are subject to our compassion, to express our compassion. That is I don't know whether I have answered to your question or that's my answer.
Yes. Fatima?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. Just with regards to the economic progress, I'm not the best to speak on this, but there's definitely not a need to, curtail economic progress. We can develop green technologies, appliances that are green efficient, and to invest in green technologies, renewable sources of energy. These are real opportunities of growth in the economic sector that we can embrace. So it doesn't have to be one or the other.
I think here is earlier Fatima used when she was presenting her paper, the contentment. That is one of the really, really important mental quality. When we lack contentment, then no matter what we have got, there's no joy. It is like in Tibetan, the language, there is one nice analogy. Without contentment, then it is like drinking salty water to solve the thirst. If you have a contentment, then, whatever possession you have, there's a sense of joy. And that is really, a very important mental quality to be cultivated. These mental qualities, love, compassion, contentment, wisdom, need to be cultivated through the training, particularly from the Buddhist point of view. Earlier, one of the brothers talked about meditation. Meditation these days become very fashionable term, but it is a technique to cultivate love, compassion, altruism, awareness, contentment. It is a technique. It is not some sort of magical thing. It is a mental training, methods. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah. There's a question to Geshe-la also about how Buddhists handle environmental crisis. Maybe Geshe-la can respond.
Okay. When we use the term Buddhist, I'm sure there are individually Buddhist practitioners work, to preserve, environment, damage. But collectively, there is a gap. That's what I see. Collectively, there's no enough voice, to talk to the community, to the wider outside the Buddhist community. How can we use the teachings of the Buddha and the other Buddhist teachers' teachings to preserve environment damage and ecology damage? We need collective voice. We need more leadership. That is what I think is lacking. I'm so sure individually there are people, certain small community, small, the pockets of individual may do that. But the problem is really, really big. So we need to, of course, need to start from the individual level, but really we need to put effort to go more global and wider community to using some of those teachings of the Buddha, which I just mentioned. Buddha clearly stated, have a middle way lifestyle, not to consume, what is there all the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe-la. Geshe-la also mentioned about wisdom supported by the heart, which means a skillful means. There's a question on the chat box about these huge political differences between big countries. The leaders of the big countries are preventing individual efforts in this global warming and climate change. From your perspective and Buddhism perspective, and maybe from Fatima, how can we individual maybe suggest to these political leaders who make decisions, what are the skillful means to resolve these differences?
Fatima, you go ahead first.
Well, I can't really say too much about the political situations that I'm not very well versed in, but just in general, our political leaders, at least here, are, elected officials. So if you make climate an issue, like in the last Canadian election, climate crisis was one of the top issues that people said they wanted to hear the politicians speak on. And it became a national issue. It hasn't been, it's a recent shift, but it hasn't been at the top of the agendas. So we can see a shift, happening, and our political leaders, at least in the country that I live in, are elected officials. So you speak with your vote. So where you can, and it's not always effective, I know that. But when there's a critical mass saying that we don't accept this anymore, at least the conversation started to change.
I think, it is true, as Fatima has said, sometimes these, the powerful people making decisions on the basis of what they want instead of what really need. We feel very overwhelmed by their power, all those things. But still, we can do at the individual level to raise awareness as much as we can, because, from the teachings of the Buddha, Buddha had said many times, that no matter how difficult the action, but if the goal is something meaningful, something helpful and useful, then we should go ahead. So therefore, I think that sometimes we may think, what I can do, I'm just individual. They have a huge power, they have money power, they have political power. And sometimes that kind of attitude really, stops what we can do. As earlier professor, I think, almost said, we have free will on this planet. Not all not all human beings are very greedy, very, ignorant. There are many, good-hearted human beings. What we need to do, we need to work together. We need to work together, initially individual level, then bring to the, collective level. I'm thinking about while I'm saying this, I'm thinking about these young, the people who are demonstrating. They are really, school children, age 12, 13, 14, like that. these are the really something very, very, positive sign. And we have to nurture them. We have to give them support, whatever that we can, because these are our future. These are our future. And these are the good, very positive sign, I feel. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a hand raised by Sahira. Please go ahead, Sahira. You can unmute yourself. If you don't, Nuruddin Akbar, you also have a question to ask in person.
Hello.
Yes, Sahira, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this conference. It's been an eye-opener in many ways. The reason why I raised my hand was when you were both the speakers were trying to answer this question. Like I'm a housewife with 2 children, and the political scene is the same in all the countries, right? So I don't think there's much that we can expect from political leaders in bringing about a change in terms of, saving this planet. I'd like to share I'll take very less time and share a small experience of mine. But 5 years back, I stay in a gated community which has 600 villas, independent houses, and which has a lot of green wealth, a lot of flora and fauna. So since I'm a nature lover and a conservationist, I tried to bring in all the children in the campus to understand the green wealth. So I had a rally for children on Children's Day, and I tried to form a green club for children who can take care and convert the whole community into a plastic-free and, eco-friendly community. But over a period, what happened was there was a lot of resistance from parents in sending their wards for all this volunteering activity because they felt they could spend this time reading and writing and, becoming doctors, engineers. So eventually what happened was I gave up. But after some time, I just came across some message which said that it's not about what others can do, it's the little difference that each of us can make. So that's when I started an initiative, which I have a group of 200 members now, who were zero in sustainability, and today they are all living sustainable life. They have sustainable practices at home. So I'm not an ecologist. I'm not a very highly qualified. I'm just a mother who's passionate towards the environment and the creations of the Almighty. And I'm really worried that the state at which it is deteriorating, I'd like to see children getting bonded. So my main mission is to basically connect every child and, make a bond, create a bond, and that becomes a parenting value. Because ultimately today we educated parents are becoming a barrier in this. So I think I don't think if we keep waiting for politicians to do something, it never happens because they have vested interests. It's just those tiny droplets of water that make the mighty ocean. If platforms like this can come forward, can we synergize, take the help of all you great, amazing speakers who have done so much of work, and with your mentorship and guidance, we make even little difference. If from 0 to 200 families, and those 200 parents are going to influence their children. So that is how change can happen, because anything that is good, there is more resistance and it is slow, it is time consuming. But then that should not stop us from doing what little we can do, because it's how much impact I as an individual can make, that matters to me, because I am answerable to the Lord, to the Creator who has created me, right? So from all those slides of Buddhism and Islam, that's what it says, that we are answerable to our God in the hereafter. So I think, I'm sorry, I don't think I have, and I'm sorry if I've, interfered and taken her time, but I just wanted to share this little experience that just let's look at what each of us can do, because together I'm sure someday we can make some difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sahira, for the sharing. Yes.
Thank you, Sister Sahira. And it's the title of the conference is Dialogue. So we need this dialogue. So we appreciate your insights. I just wanted to piggyback on that, and something that Jesse Tashi had said in terms of inculcating in our youth. I myself am an educator. I'm in the elementary school. I was a kindergarten teacher for about 5 years. And one of the things that, when I was doing my environmental education course, is that people can't care about something that they don't love. And So simply by, if we're just going to talk or read stories, or that is important, but we actually have to bring them out in nature. And so, despite, I live in Canada, so we have, it's winter right now. So even when it was very cold, we had a policy that unless it goes below -20, which is extremely cold, only then are we not allowed to take the students out. So even when it was -15, some of the parents would be looking at me like, "You're not going to take them out," and I said, "I am." And as long as students are dressed appropriately, there's no such thing as bad weather. We would tell them there's just bad clothing. So, we would make sure that our students were dressed appropriately, but we would go hiking even in wintertime and just to once a month, and I teach in a secular environment. But just bringing that constant connection to nature, I now actually teach some of the students that I taught when I was in kindergarten. So I had a 5-year or 6-year gap, and now they came back because I'm still at the same school, and they still remember. Those trips that we would take every month to go outside. So, what you're doing, Sister Sahira, is so important. And thank you for that reminder of, to just keep at it. And sometimes we don't know, just like nature teaches us, we might be the person who plants the seed, but we might not see the fruit of that, and it might blossom later. So, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. Jazakallah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. We do have one question from Nuruddin. He has typed it on the chat box, talking about how to, if I can rephrase it, that how can we change from this thinking about environment friendly with all this like carbon footprint and things like that to personal internal change, I would think. How can we mutually reinforce these two?
Can I ask the question?
Sure. Please do.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I think this is very interesting explanation put from the speaker, and I feel that one important point from the explanation from the two speaker is about the strategy to improve the nature, the ecosystem, the cosmos, starting from improving our own soul. And I feel that this discussion of ecology with esoteric dimension, starting from our soul, is rarely discussed compared to the more exoteric ecological tradition. For example, the discussion about Kyoto Protocol, COP, carbon trading, environmental law, and etc. And I want to ask, my question is, can this esoteric ecological tradition about improving our soul be used to strengthen the current esoteric ecological tradition that I feel is more about heavy on law and about the creating product that more environmental. Maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, I think there is a natural changes in the ecology, in the environment. There's a talk that geologists, they talk about circles of ice age, then global warming. There's that kind of natural changes in the global environmentally and the ecology. Here we are talking about human impact. Our actions, our greeted minds, motivated by greeted minds, then are consuming endlessly. That is very, very damaging that to the ecology or the environment. that things we should and we can change. But natural circle, which seems, since the planet existed, it goes through different stages. I don't think that we can do that much. But what we can do and what we should do, whether you can use the exoteric element or whatever, but humans input to cause destructions in the ecology. In that case, then we need to look at starting from the individuals, our soul, our attitude, our behavior. We need to start from here instead of looking something outside. What are the wrongs outside there? Of course, outside there are problems, but starting from here, that is from the Buddhist point of view, that is how we try to, difficult, but try to sort out. Yeah.
Yes, Fatima, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jashitashi, and thank you for the question, Brother Nuruddin. I guess I would just, highlight, something in psychology. What's happened was, that push for the realm of psychology to become a measurable scientific science, and they took the metaphysics out of it. And there's barely any conception now of some of the Western theories and psychologies don't even acknowledge that the human being has a soul. And we can see where that has taken. It hasn't, brought about the well-being of human beings with that conception. And so psychology is still stuck in trying to figure out ways, and they're now being forced now to have, like, for example, in the program that I am, it's now spiritually integrated psychotherapy, because there was a need to recognize that spirituality contributes fundamentally to the well-being of the human being. And similarly, as you're saying, it fundamentally contributes to the well-being of the earth. So we're going to need to, as people of faith, of faith communities, to stand up against this concept that we can continue to exclude spirituality from our discussions in well-being of the earth, of people, of human beings. And we're going to have to push back on that and ask for that inclusion. And people have seen that, in the medical realm as well. When they've done studies, they have found that people want their spirituality to be parts of the treatment. But doctors feel very ill-equipped to do that, because there isn't even one course taught. I'm talking from North America. But in the medical schools, there isn't even one course taught on the integration of spirituality and well-being or religion and health. And so they feel very ill-equipped to do it, so they don't do it. But there's a need to do it. And so I think if we're just always going to, let the dominant voice be voices of excluding spirituality, excluding religion, then faith communities have a responsibility here to try and bring the esoteric realms into these discussions.
Thank you for Fatima and Keshitashi. Raymond Uy, you can ask your question now.
Thank you, organizer and panel speakers. And the problem of ecological damage is actually done by a handful of people, especially those who are non-believers. To them, religion is not important, or the spirituality is not important to them. I don't know what do they believe in. I think one aspect that we may consider to solve this problem is to eliminate the dogma or religion aspect, which is because a lot of problem in this world dividing humanity is because of the dogmatic effect. People have different dogma, and they use religion to separate themselves rather than to integrate and do good things together. So I would like to hear from the speakers, how can we proceed from here by maybe not using religion, but using conversion of spirituality with science, so that it will convince the people that the spirituality is something behind, it's something we need to take care. Modern science has not been able to integrate with spirituality until quite recently, with the ability of quantum physics. With the quantum physics, if we understand quantum physics, then we will be able to understand spirituality a bit better. This is something I think Buddhism has been able to connect to some extent. So maybe you can give some opinion on how, what do you think of going beyond religion and dogmatic to help to integrate mankind, so that to increase their awareness to solve this global issue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. So about going beyond religion. So, Shitashi Sering?
Okay. I think we have to be very realistic in how much that we can, change or contribute to the people who are destroying our environment or creating destruction in ecology. The real world, there were and there will be in the future. There are people who are not very, constructive, in the many different layers, not only in the non-believers, but also in the believer. So we have to be very realistic, how much that we can do. But at the same time, as I said earlier, we have to be like, for example, from the Buddhist point of view, we have to be very, very clear and very honest if we would like to share, some of the helpful, useful means and methods and thinking to the non-believer, we should share, but without intention to that person to turn into Buddhism. That if we create that work in that kind of, what you call the motivation, then it is not going to work well. So I am sure, as I mentioned earlier, and also previous speakers talk about Islam and Buddhism, there are lots of good, profound teachings that we can share to the non-believers, But we should share with honestly and sincerely. That is important. Anyway, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think the question was to if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Go, speaking to this in non-religious terms. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things, this is actually a treat for me to be able to speak in religious terms, because I live in a secular worldview, and I teach in a secular worldview. So the ways that we can bring the environment and love for the environment and leaving maybe religious terminology out of it is something I've had to do. So I really just believe that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. You know, if you allow people to experience nature, you don't need to say much. It'll allow people to have more contemplation. It'll bring up curiosities. But we have to give those opportunities to do that. So we can do that, maybe not using religious terminology, but just inviting people more to connect with nature. And that will start to foster a love for it, because you know, as I said earlier, you can't care about something that you're not attached to, that you don't love. And you know, we've heard from our Buddhist teachers and you know, about having love and compassion, and you can begin to foster that by spending more time even just in nature. So that would be, you know, one way. You know, interestingly enough, they do have, I believe in Japan, what they call forest bathing now. So as a prescription, they tell people to go and walk, you know, in the forest. And so those are now prescriptions, you know, for helping with anxiety and decreasing stress. So, you know, we just need to allow and consciously bring people more in connection with nature. And that doesn't necessarily have to have any religious terminology attached to it. Allahu Alam, God knows best.
Wonderful, yeah. There's certainly more and more so we have to use, again, wisdom and skillful means to handle different type of environment. Chikyo has a second question. He's talking about the both scientific community as well as the faith or religious or spiritual community blaming each other for not doing their part or hindering the effort for climate to make a better world for each other. So now how do we bring these two communities together is his question. Any advice?
I think it is not easy, because in each group or each community has its own, you know, baggage to carry. I experienced this when I was doing my master in London University in SOAS. You know, because I wear with my Buddhist robe. Just wearing the robe, people, you know, some of the professors are very difficult to talk, because they feel, you know, wearing a Buddhist robe, they feel, if I'm talking to this man, my colleagues see I'm a little bit crazy. So that sort of things are there. It is not easy, but it is not impossible. For example, His Holiness Dalai Lama has created really very, very amazing dialogue with many, you know, I mean, what's called the high, you know, scientists in all different fields, you know, all different fields. So it is possible, but there are, you know, barriers, there are sort of baggage to, and not easy to jump into other side and have the good communication or good sharing. But we can do that. You know, for example, today's in this group, there are very several, it seems, eminent scientists in here, also practitioners. And that is this part of the process. I think we don't need to go into one institution. You know, it's not going to become one institution, but it is possible. There are also obstacles. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Fatima, your view.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jashitashi. We have to take an interdisciplinary approach to this. We can't leave any community behind. We're all inhabitants of the earth, and we're all going to come with our strengths. So, you know, and there's something to be said about, you know, throwing off our colonial heritage and, you know, where faith communities are seen as inferior. And sometimes we're afraid to, you know, present what we can present, but you know, historically, the Muslims have been able to, and this is something that was not part of our heritage in the Islamic heritage, where Muslim scientists didn't see science as a competition to religion. It was an expression of getting to know the divine in different ways, and to use our intellect to serve the divine. So there was no dichotomy between religion and science. So we need to come back to that, at least in the Islamic heritage. We need to reunite that. And we haven't really had, we haven't had that huge dichotomy, but we've inherited, you know, those aspects where we're being told that if you're religious, then you're not embracing science. So we need to challenge that.
Thank you. There's a question on given earlier on about in the effort to promote sustainability in ecology, what is the difference between religious effort and spirituality? Religion and spirituality. Thank you.
My understanding, even in English, religion is quite a recent terminology, and spirituality too. So I think that behind those different terms, I'm not sure what's the difference in here. People tend to use spirituality less sort of weight than the religion. If we use religion, there is this, you know, dogma based. If we use spirituality, has less dogma, and that is my understanding. But both terms are, for me, is the second language. I don't have my sort of gut feeling. What's the difference between those? That, you know, what the meaning? What's the difference between those two terms? I really don't know what to say on that.
Yes, Fatima, do you have anything else to say?
Well, just, you know, is the question related to how is religion and spirituality different in terms of ecology, or is it just in general?
In terms of what's the difference in religion and spirituality in promoting sustainability in ecology?
In promoting, okay. Well, you know, again, like you can have for example, we have religious injunctions. You know, example I might use might be from my own tradition that I kind of spoke to in the slide. The religious injunction in Ramadan is to fast, and the heart of the spirituality that you're trying to get through refraining, through the act of eating and drinking is a spiritual intention. What you're trying to inculcate is a God consciousness. So it's possible to do outward acts of the religion, but still miss the spirituality of it. And in terms of, so that might be, you know, one type of distinction there. And if we're going to just be focused on outward acts, but we're not inculcating that spiritual sense or spiritual beings, which is also a part of the religion, you know, you can't separate the at least in, you know, from what I'm hearing from Jashitashi, and also in the Islamic tradition, you're not going to, you're just going to be an outward shell, just doing rituals if you don't infuse the spirituality within it. So of course, you know, you could enact acts, or you could go through motions, but you need to still work on the spirituality, as I said in the presentation, and that will, you know, just inculcating that sense, as Jashitashi was also, you know, speaking to, of contentment, of counteracting, you know, greed. That's going to come by the aspects of fostering that spirituality part, which is part of our religion.
Thank you very much. Such a wonderful gathering today. We have now come to the end of the session. My humble thanks to Keshitashi Sering and Ms. Fatima for sharing their wisdom with us today. Their words and thoughts shine every bright in our minds and hearts so that collectively we may take immediate action and just not listen to their talks and so that we will sustain our only home, this planet Earth. I now hand over to the session back to Brother Adli.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goh Pit Pin, for moderating the session, and of course to both of our speakers, Venerable Abbot Ken Rinpoche Keshitashi Sering, and also Sister Fatima, to spend your time this evening, and of course not to forget to all participants who have stayed to this event from since morning until today, until right now. And this reminds me that both of the presentation gives us a lot of insights, a lot of optimism, a lot of hope on the things that we can do, which brings me to the Suratul As, or the surah that talks about time, which means that by time, surely humanity is in grave loss, except those who have faith do good and urge each other to do truth and urge each other to perseverance. In the sense that, yes, it's good for you to be a believer, yes, it's good for you to have faith, but what more important is for you to urge each other to do truth and urge each other to be patient in persevering in sharing the truth, which of course conclude the session or the conference of IBED Conference 2022 for today. And again, we look forward to see you tomorrow. And from the organizers, we'd like to share that the same link will be used. So you can just use the same link to join tomorrow. Have a great evening. And for any question and answers, continue to use our chat. And like I said, it was shared earlier, that some of the questions which have not been answered we will try our best to make sure that it is posted in our website. Then it will be literally answered there. So thank you so much on behalf of the organizers. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.